Hey everyone, I'm Paul with MadCap Software. Going to talk about creating notes and examples and tips and different elements like that. It's something that a lot of people ask about. What are the best practices? How do you style it? What's the smartest thing to do? So we're going to step through that. We're going to build these things from scratch in this video. Now, there are a lot of things that I'm going to cover, different concepts that you can apply not only to creating these elements, but other things in your Flare project. So the video is broken up into different sections. You can hover over the play bar, see the names of the different sections. You can go forward or backwards, rewatch parts if you need to. And that's what we're going to do. So let's hop right in and start at the beginning. First of all, when we think about creating elements like this, notes and examples and so forth, you got to make a decision. What kinds of content are you going to be using for this? Should you use paragraphs to create these? Should you use something else? Should you use div tags, text boxes? What should you use? So I actually recommend that people, when they create these things, that they use div tags. And I'm going to go into the Flare project and show you exactly why that's what I recommend. I've got a tiny little Flare project open here. I just created this using the empty project template in Flare, and I only have one topic in here, and there's just a few files throughout this project here. And in this topic, very simple heading, paragraph. I'm going to add a couple of other short paragraphs. This is my first paragraph, actually my first paragraph after that delete text stuff, and then second paragraph. And third paragraph, even though these aren't really, they're not even complete sentences, but they'll serve our purposes. So you can see we got 4 paragraphs in here. All right. And so maybe this is just some regular content, and I want this to be a note or an example or a warning or something like that. So I want it to look different. I want it to stand out from the rest of the text. Now, I could use a paragraph. I could style a paragraph. And when I talk about that, I mean a class of the paragraph, because this is the P tag. You can see I've got my structure bars on, which you can toggle on and off here. And so this is the main paragraph, but I could have a special variation of that paragraph called a class. Maybe call it p.node or p.tip or something like that, and style that different so it looks not the same as regular paragraphs. So I could do that. The reason why I suggest people don't do that is what happens when you have multiple paragraphs that you want part of a node or one of these elements. Maybe all 3 of these I want in there. Well, if I put the styling just on a paragraph, maybe a border around it, well, that gets tricky to have these other elements within that. It's easiest to just wrap the paragraphs in a div, which is just a container. And so I could select these right here, and on the home ribbon, come up to this button. And there are a few group styles in here, and one's called a div. Just click OK. Now, it didn't change the look of this, but what it did was took these 3 paragraphs and put them inside this div tag. So when I click the div tag bar, it selects everything. When I select just one of these paragraphs, it just selects the paragraph. So I can put my styling on the div, and so everything is just housed into one area. That is the big reason why I suggest divs. And you might have more than just text. You might have images or lists or any number of things within that node or a special element. And so a div is just going to make it easier to do that. So what we want to talk about next, now that we have this, I'm going to just save this, and we want to talk about, all right, so what's the best way to style this? All right, we know we want to put some styling on the div, but maybe we want to have different divs. And so we don't want all the styles on one. So what do? Well, that's where we get to style classes, which is what we'll cover next. let's go back into our Flare project and talk about these things called style classes. All right, I'm going to open up my style sheet, come over here on the left in the Content Explorer, and you can see, yeah, I don't have many things in here at all, but I do have a style sheet. I'm going to open this up, and it is opening right now in advanced view. And we do have a simplified view. You just click this button and it'll switch over to that. So you can work in either view, but I'm going to recommend that people use the advanced view, and not only because there are some things that we need to do in this video where we can't do it in the simplified view, but also because the advanced view over the years has gotten easier and easier to use. So I'm going back over to that. And so it's not that much different. It's actually pretty easy. So that's the view we're going to use. And then you can also open up your style sheet editor in the text editor, which we'll look at later to do even more in there. So first of all, okay, we got our editor, and I am just real quickly going to take a look a little bit at the UI here. All the styles are listed on the left. The things you do with them, the properties, the settings are over here on the right in the advanced view. Now, there are a lot of styles in here, a lot of styles. You're going to see a lot of gray in here. That means these are styles that aren't explicitly set in this style sheet. They're being inherited from the factory style sheets where you installed Flare. But there are other things that are dark, like this H1, where, all right, we've got some settings in here that are explicitly set here, but we don't necessarily want to see all these styles all the time, so we can filter it. We're dealing with paragraph level, even though we're going to be using divs. Those are considered paragraph styles because they're block level styles. So now it's limiting the number of styles in here. You can see there's our divs, and there's headings in there, and there's our regular old P tag in there, P style. So you also have all these other filters in here that control how you see things over here. And so if I select H1, you can see, all right, I've got some properties in here and some settings, and it's showing things right now in alphabetical view, but I could go to group view by clicking that button. And so that might help you find things easier. Right now, it's also set to show set properties, things that are already set for this style in here. But I could change this to go to all properties, and you're going to get a whole lot more in here because it's going to give you a lot more categories, things that I don't have set yet. So we're going to be kind of going back and forth with these different options to do our stuff in this video. Now, talked about classes. Well, let's go down here. Even though we're not going to use our paragraph tag, I'm just going to quickly create a class for you so you just kind of get the idea. I'm going to click Add Selector, which is technically what we're doing, or we're creating style selectors in here. Class name, what do I want to call this? Well, in this case, let's just say I call it Note. You can call it anything you want, but Note is nice and descriptive. I know what it means. I want to use it to create a note to look different from my regular paragraphs. So these things out here at the root level, the first level, those are your main styles. And then if you've got this little expand collapse thing right here, that's going to show any classes under it. So the class will inherit all of the settings that are coming from the P style, and then you can override them, or you can add other settings there in your class. So think of this as the parent, and this is the child. All right, so it's going to inherit some stuff, but it can be its own thing too. So I could apply a class to, in this case, save my changes, and I could apply that class to anything in here. I have my style drop down saved up here in my quick access toolbar, but it's also here in the home ribbon right here. And I could select P note because I created that, and it would apply that special style. All right, so that's what style classes are about and what they let you do. But we're going to work not on the paragraph, we're going to work on the div. And it's all gray right now because I don't have anything explicitly set really in here. I do have some factory classes. And what I am going to do is click Add Selector. I am going to add one called initially, I'm going to call this one note blue. We'll come back and just do a regular note one, but I'm going to show you something coming up here where I can just quickly create a design, that a note that has some blue elements in it. So I just created that style class in there. And then I will in the next section, I'm going to create a class called div note. And based on that one, what I'll do is I'll get all the settings just right, just the way I want them. And then I'll make copies of that for my example, for my tip, for my warning, because a lot of those settings are going to be the same. And so there's no reason to really, reinvent the wheel. There's just some coloring and images that are going to be different. All right, so that is style classes. That's what we're going to use in this section. And I have them my div note blue. And if I go in here, I can click on my div structure bar this time. And now I can select that style class, div note blue, div.note blue. Now I didn't change anything because I haven't put any styles on it yet. That's what we're going to do coming up next. What we're going to start with is we're going to look at the design and the design mock-up. You're going to start at the end result. What do you want your notes and tips and things to look like? In the last section, I created that little div.noteblue style class. Let's go in and do something with that, and I'll show you how you can just create a design really quickly from your style sheet editor. Just thinking about some of the notes that I've seen people use the design, there's something that I think is relatively common that we can reproduce very quickly using our div note blue. So I've seen a lot where people will have a solid border line, vertical line on the left, and then maybe a colored background, a light colored background, and that sets the note off from the rest of the content. So we've got our style class in here. Let's go do that. So I've got div note blue. I've got it selected. Let's see what we want to use over on the left or on the right. We know we want a border on the left. And a lot of these styles are really common, and you're just going to get used to the way they're written, what they do over time. And then there are others that are just more obscure that you kind of have to look up as you go. And this is all just basic CSS stuff. And we want the border on the right side. So you have the main border, but then you have for the bottom and all these other aspects of the border. And we want the border left, and we want a blue color. So I'm going to come in here and select this and just come down and select blue. There's a basic blue. Click OK. What else do I want? The width. I want the width to be a little bit thick. I use pixels quite a bit, so I'm just going to set this to 5 pixels. Click OK. And the style. Because what do you want? Do you want a dotted line? Do you want double lines? I want a just solid line in there, and that should do it. And the background. So let's go back up. There's a background section, and I want to change the background color. So I'm going to select that, click that, and it remembers my last selection, which was blue, and I can just go in here and select a lighter version of it and click OK. And there we go. And save. My changes go back to the topic, and there it is. Now, of course, there's more you'd probably want to do to this. You want to add some spacing in here, but you get the idea. That's a really quick look at it. In fact, what I'm going to do right now, because it just kind of bothers me how these paragraphs are so close together, I am going to go change the spacing on just the paragraph, and the main paragraph, which is going to get inherited by, well, these are all just regular paragraphs too. You can see they're just like that. It's just that they're being shown with that light background because the div has that. So I'm going to go in here to the paragraph and spacing. So where do you set spacing in here? Well, that's in the box category, and you've got margins and you've got padding. Now, I'm going to set so you can see the bottom and the top are set at 0. Also on the main one, it's inheriting this setting of 1.12 EMs and 0 in here. And so I actually am going to use the main margin in here, show you real quickly how you can set the numbers for bottom, left, right, top, all in one place. So think of this as a clock. And you start at high noon up at the top. So you're setting the first number you type is going to be for the top margin. And then you go to the right, and then you go to the bottom and the left. You're going around the clock. And so I'm going to just click in here. I can select the little ellipsis and choose settings, but I'm just going to type it in here, show you how I can do this. So margin, what do I want at the top? I'm going to say 8 pixels, type a space. What do I want? What go around? So now it's on the right hand side. So what do I want for my right margin? Well, I can just say I want 0 pixels, and then bottom, I'm going to do 8 pixels, and then the left, 0 pixels. Now, if I click off on this, these numbers aren't going to change right here because this is explicitly set. You see the dark text. So I'm just going to go remove this in here and remove this in here, and then it populates automatically. 8008. It's the same as up there. I'm going to click save and go back here. Now I've got a little bit more space. Of course, I'd like more space probably between this border and the text. That's something we're going to cover coming soon when we talk about other spacing padding. Now, that's a quick look at just a design just off the top of my head, but graphic design isn't my wheelhouse. That's not my thing. And so I rely on graphic designers, people who are good at designing, and I get mock-ups from them. That's what I recommend that you do, unless you're really good at graphic design too. I always start from the end. I will come up with an idea of kind of what I want, but I leave the details of the design up to the graphic designers, and then they provide me with a mock-up. It's often in a PDF document or something like that, an image that shows what the final look should be. Now, I don't have the original mock-ups of the notes and examples and those elements that I have in the help system, but I do have the final result because I have the output. So let's go look at the output real quick, and we'll see what we're going to build from scratch. In the online help, I've got a topic called snippets, and if I scroll down, you can see, all right, there's an example, there's a warning, there's a note. They all look pretty similar, except different color borders and these little images next to them, and then the kind of set off text in here is different for each one, but they're all pretty simple and similar. And so this is what I was given. And so I just recreated this. Now, if I go to another topic in here, I also have tips, and there's one right there, a tip. So it's just a different color and different image. So what we want to do, I'm just going to reproduce this, show you how it's done. And we're going to use our divs and our style classes to create all this. Now, when I get a mock-up from a graphic designer, I also ask for specifications, size of things and color, and just whatever is going to help me, and any assets like these little images, and they'll give them to me. And I use all of that to put it together. So we have our mock-ups. We know what we want to do. Next section, we're going to dig in and start styling these. Now we're really going to start getting our feet wet and begin designing these things, building them from the ground up. So when you look at designing, formatting content in your topics, really, it's just a whole bunch of rectangles and rectangles within rectangles. It's just that it's not always clear that's the case because some of these things don't have elements like borders or shading on them. So you got a regular paragraph here, but it's within a rectangle, and your headings within a rectangle, and lists are within rectangles. And these elements down here, tips and notes, so obviously those are in rectangles, and we can see it because we've got the borders. So that's what we're talking about. So what are the elements again? For each of these things that we want to design, we've got borders, we've got some spacing, we've got images. Those are some of the main things. So let's go back into our Flare project. I'm going to remove this styling here. So I've got div selected, and you can see div note blue, and I can easily get back to where I was by just selecting reset class. So now they're still wrapped in within a div, but they just look like the rest of the content in here. And I'm going to apply my div. Oh, I don't have my div note yet. We want to go in and create that, and then we'll apply it. So let's go back into our style sheet. So we've got div and we've got div note. So we're going to create a brand new selector. This one is just going to be called note. All right, do that. Now, what do we want to change? Okay, we talked about the border. So over here on the right, I am going to actually choose set properties. I like that filter because I get this field right here. You can see there's nothing yet set on this new style class. And I can either select things from this dropdown and just add them on the fly, or if I know what they're called, I can just type in here. So I know I want to change the border, and I want the border all the way around. So I'm not just talking about the, the right, left, top. I'm going to type in border here, add that, and it gives me this default setting. So solid, yeah, I want a solid border, 2 pixels. That sounds good. And we're starting with the note. That one was yellow. And when I do the color, you can select this and choose a color using any of these options. But if your graphic designer gives you a hex number, that starts with the hashtag or the pound sign there, you can just type that directly in, and that's what I'm going to do, FDC80B, and then I click off of this, and there is my yellow border. All right, so that was really easy. I could set all of that information just in that one field. Now, margin. All right, I want to add a margin because I want the spacing, these notes and tips and things, there's going to be other content above it, next to it, above it, below it. And I don't want them to just get mashed in there. I want to make sure there's some space. So I'm going to add a margin. So I'm going to type that, and I can use that technique of just going around the clock. Start at the top. What do I want for my top margin? I'm going to say 20 pixels, space. Right margin, let's do 10 pixels. Bottom, let's do 20 pixels again. And the left, I'm going to do 0 pixels because I don't want any spacing on the left. Set that. Go ahead and save that. Now, padding. All right, so you've got margins and you've got padding. Well, what's the difference between those? Let me show you this graphic that I like to use that helps make it clear. So in the help, you can just search for something like this. Graphic comes up on a number of things. Type padding in there, and you're going to see this right here, this graphic. So this shows you, all right, I've got content, and by content, I'm talking about normally text. All right, so there's the text, and what is around the text? Well, there's padding. And then around that is your border. So the padding is the spacing between the content, your text, and the border. And then outside of the border is additional space. That's your margin. So that's the difference between padding and margin. So I set the margin on the top, the right, and the bottom, none on the left. Now padding, yeah, I want some padding in there because right now, if we go back to our project, you're going to see, all right, I got my border, but boy, that's tight in there. So let's add some padding in here. And again, I'm just going to use the main padding setting in here. And I am going to do, so start at the top. I want 10 pixels, let's say, and then on the right-hand side, let's do another 10, and the bottom we'll do 10. And I could have just done 10 pixels for all the way around, but I want on the left-hand side 40 pixels. I want extra space there, just like that. And so why do I want that extra space? Well, that is because I have an image. that's going to go over there. So I want that extra space. So the padding's done. Let's talk about the image next. Now, I know that some people out there, they're creating notes, they're inserting tables. And so they've got different cells and they'll insert an image, for example, in a left cell, a little cell on the left, and then their content on the right. I wouldn't recommend that you do that because you're just going to have to insert that image every time that you have a note or an example or something like that. What you want to do is set the image in the background, and then you position it the way that you want. So what I'm going to do, actually, before I do that, I don't have my images yet. I'm going to copy them from this Windows, and I've got, press Control C there, and I'm going to go in here, and in my Content Explorer, I don't have a folder yet for images. I have no images in here. Type that, and then I usually will have subfolders in here because and I'm just going to put these in assets. You can name it whatever you want, and I'm going to paste these. I like to have subfolders because your number of images is going to grow over time, and I just like to keep it organized. So I've got an image for example, note, tip, and warning, but I have 2 images for each one of these. And the reason I have 2 images is because I want to create both online and print output. You don't necessarily have to have an image for each, but when I was originally doing this, I found that having a different image, the bigger image for my print output. So this one, for example, is going to be for my online, and this I'm going to use for my print. And you can see the little display down here, the preview, and this one's bigger because when I generate my PDF output, that's actually going to shrink down, and it just looked crisper and nicer when I had a separate one. So these are the images we're going to use. So I'm on my div note. I go in here, and the first thing I'm going to select is not image. I'm not going to be typing that. See, nothing's coming up. It's my background image for this style class. Press enter, and now I can go in here and select it. And I'll just drill down and select note right there. That's what I want. And boy, that gets really busy down here because it's just repeating. I need a couple of other properties in here. I need to set them. And so one of them is obviously I don't want it to repeat. That's what it's doing. So I'm going to go in here, and this is background, repeat. And again, if you're not sure what these things are, you can get, they're all listed in here. You can go down and select them. All right, background, repeat. I want no repeat. All right, good. So I've only got one, but you look in the preview and it's mashed in the upper left-hand corner. So I need to position this. So I'm going to use background position. And this positions things on the H and V axis, the horizontal and vertical axis. So horizontal, how far over do you want it to go on that horizontal axis, and then vertical, how far down or up do you want it to go there? And I could fill in each one of these, but just like those padding and margin settings, I can just type it in here directly. So the first one, I'm going to type 10 pixels for my horizontal axis and 25 pixels for the vertical. And see, the preview in here isn't exact, but it's going to be closer when we actually see the results. It's not going to be quite down, that far off. I don't know why the preview is like that, but just to let you know, it's going to be okay. So now I saved that. I'm going to go into my topic, and now that I have my style class created, I can go select it, and here, div note, and there it is. It's the editor and the preview that the preview did represent what is showing up in the editor. But if I were to look at this in the preview, the topic, you're going to see it's closer. So why does that happen? And if I generated the output, it would look like this. Why does that happen? I don't know. I don't know. But I just know from experience to preview it first to make sure. And even in previewing, you can see, all right, so there might be a little more space here than I want. So I can adjust that. I can go back to my vertical axis right here. Let's do 20 instead. So that's what a lot of this is tweaking to figure out what looks best. So it shifted a little bit in the preview, and there it is in the topic. But if I preview the topic, what it's going to generate as, that looks pretty good right there. So there it is. So I've got that one set. Now, I did mention I have the other image for print. So here's what you do. We're going into the style sheet again. Now I've been setting all of these on the default medium. That means unless I specify otherwise, the output is going to use this, the online output. Print output, by default, it's going to use a print medium. I'm going to open that up next to this. There's my print medium. And you can see it's inheriting all of this stuff from the default medium. And I want to use all that stuff, except I'm going to change the image. I'm going to come in here and choose Note 2. All right, so I got that. And that's the only thing I'm going to change on this. I could change other things, but it's all good. Now let's actually create I only have an HTML5 target, so I'm going to create a new target in here. I'm going to call it PDF. That's the name's already in there. I'm going to select PDF and click Add. And that print medium is already set. You can see it here on the Advanced tab. It's right there, Print. So now I can preview this topic as the PDF and see how that looks. And there it is. So that is off just a little bit, but it is using that other image. And so I could tweak that. I'm going to leave that the way it is right now. But I just wanted to show you how you can have slightly different settings for your online output and for your print output. Now we've got our note div. And what I'm going to do is copy and paste this 3 times so I get example, tip, and warning. We'll do those other elements also. Now, before I do that, I'm going to click on my default medium because I don't want it to be copying the print medium, which only has that one setting. I want to make copies of all of this in here, all of these settings. So I'm going to press Control-C and Control-V. I'm going to do it 2 more times. So I get 3 of these in here. And now I'm going to rename this one. I will call this example. And I will rename this one tip. And I'm going to rename this one warning. So a lot of the work's done for me. I just need to go into each one of these and see what needs to change. So first of all, background image is going to be different. So for my example on the default medium, it's going to be this one, that's small. And I can go right over to my print medium and select the other larger image. And then the color, I want the color to be different. Otherwise, I want all these things to be the same. So I want this to be 5308BE. Oops, BE. That's the color that was given to me. It's purple. All right, so that's good. And I'm going to go down to tip. And I'm going to choose the tip image for online and the tip image for print. And I'm going to change the color. This one is going to be a green. So it's BED 420. Click off of that. All right, that looks good. Come down to warning. And warning has its own images. One there. And the print one is right there. And the color is a red, and the exact text number is CB1313. Click off there. Got it. All right, saved it all. I've got my 4 elements in here, all created. we've made a lot of progress already, but we still have some work to do. Now we go back and look at these elements, how we want them to look when they're all done. One of the things we haven't done yet is account for this set-off text, for lack of a better word, tip or a note or a warning or example. We want these to appear at the very beginning when we have one of these elements. The thing is, I could see inserting 100 notes and having to type the word note and format it each time. I don't really want to do that. I want Flare to do as much work for me as possible so that, you know, I can spend time on other things like binge watching Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix. If you're not watching that show, I don't know what you're doing with your life. So we want to automate this. That's what we're going to do. Okay, back into the project. Okay, so what we're going to do here is tell Flare to handle this with a lot more intelligence. And we are going to use something called complex selectors. And I am going to change this filter so it shows me all styles, because it was on the paragraph styles. And we've got complex selectors here. If I open this, there's already some in there, and these might look really weird to you, but it'll make sense as we create these. So what we want to tell it to do, for example, in here with the paragraph, is we want to tell it, hey, add the word note in here and make it look the way we want it to look. And we're going to do this by saying, hey, if you find a paragraph that's within this div note, then do this thing. And by the way, I haven't added the other elements yet. Let's go ahead and make copies so that we have all 4 of them in here. All right. And I'll do, so let's just change this one to div example. And this one is going to be div tip right there. And the last one, we'll change this to a warning. So each one of them, we want to have different set-off text. I just don't want to do it manually. So what we're going to do is go in here and we are going to add a new selector. And we are going to start with div in here. All right. And the class name is note. Now we already have that, div note. But what we're going to do here, I'm going to do a few things here. I'm going to show you the progression of this. I typed a space in there and I entered the word P, or the letter P. And so what I'm telling it is, hey, you come across div note, and if there's a P in there, do this thing. If there's a paragraph in there, so click OK. And now that is added to our complex selectors section. And what I'm going to add in here is an auto number. So normally when people hear an auto numbers, they think of print output, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, or, you know, image captions, 2.3, 2.4, or 2-4, you know, something like that. And it just increments. So it's usually numbers, but you can do it with text too. So I'm going to type MC auto number format. That's what I'm looking for. I'm doing it on my in my default medium so that it gets inherited by everything else. And what I'm going to do in here is click this. And now I can provide my format in here. And there's all these different commands in there in these different categories. What I want to do is I want to start with the word note, and I want it to be bold. So I'm going to start it I'm going to go down to format commands. I'm going to select, so this starts my bold text. I'm going to double click that. It's in there. What do I want to do next? Okay. I actually not only want it to be bold, but I want it to be a certain color. Maybe not black, but dark gray. So I'm going to do that. And it automatically puts in red. So I could type in black in here, or I can type in a hex number. This one, it's a real just dark gray. And it is 242-729. All right. So I've got these beginning tags, and now I can type the word note. You can see the preview changing down there as I do this. And I'm going to add my ending tag for color. So the color is within the bold. That's just the way this one is set. And there's my end bold tag. So I've got, that is my format for auto numbering. So every time it has a paragraph in there, there's going to be the word note, and it's going to look that way. So click OK and save. All right. Now, if I go back and look at this, look what it did. It added note, but it added it. There's a couple of things here. It added it in front of every paragraph, and I may not want it in front of every paragraph, maybe just the first one. The other thing is, I think, oh, I want note to be all uppercase and maybe a little bit more spacing between that. Well, I can do the all uppercase. I can go back into here and I could type all uppercase, but I can't really do the letter spacing. So I'm going to show you how you can do other settings in another way here. And I am going to go down in here all the way down to span. Span just means this is character level styling, and span already has some things in it. I'm going to add one, and I'm going to call this set off. You can name it whatever you want, but I'm just going to call it that. Okay, what do I want the set off text to look like? I know it's already going to be bold. It's already going to have that dark gray color, but I also want some letter spacing in here. And I want just a little bit more space between the words. So I'm going to do that. That did it. And I want it to always be uppercase. What if I forget to type all caps, and I want all of these elements to be the same? So I'm going to go into text, transform, and I'm going to select, say I can do capitalize, I can do lowercase, I'm going to do uppercase. All right, so the preview shows me what's going on. Click save and go back, and it's not changed yet because I haven't connected these two. So set off is done. I'm going to go back up here to my complex selectors, P or div note space P. And now I'm going to add another property in here. I'm going to add MC auto number class. So what we just did was create a class of the span tag, and I'm going to go in here and enter it. So I can just do this to add more formatting to the thing and save that, go back to my topic there. Now it's all uppercase and the letters are spaced apart just a little bit more. Great. I got that, but I only want the first one, the first paragraph to have that. So how do I solve that? It's not hard. Go back in here into styles. Now, the way that this complex selector is written, div.note space P, this is what's called a descendant selector. So think about your ancestry, for example. I'm going to press enter in here, and I'm going to create a bulleted list. 1, 2, 3. And it adds note next to each one of these. Why is that? Because the way this list is structured is it has a UL tag, that's the list, LI, that's the list item, and then it has a paragraph item within that. Now I could change this to a simplified, right click on that and say simplified, and it takes this paragraphs out. But I'm going to put them back in just to illustrate this. So, sometimes there's a refresh issue if you, like if I were to type a brand new note in here, blah, blah, and I apply div note to that, well, where's my note? Where's that word? Well, it's just a refresh issue. And you just press F5 and there's your note, and it brought them back to the list too. So descendant selector, what it's telling the editor in here is that, look, it came across P or div.note, and it says any paragraph in there, add this auto numbering to it. It's a descendant, just like you're a descendant from your ancestors. So your great, 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 great grandpa or grandma, you're descendant from them. And so it's telling you, yeah, you count, you're a descendant, so you should get this thing. What we want is a child selector instead. So even though I'm a descendant of my great, 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 great grandpa, I'm not his child. We want to style this so it's just the child in here. And so I'm going to actually open up the style sheet in the text editor and show you. This is another way that you can edit the style sheet. Let's go to the style sheet, right click, open with internal text editor. And as you add new styles and classes and things, they get added to the bottom. And so I know that that's a recent one. And so it was added here, down here. And if I add new ones, they're going to be added at the bottom of this text file. Now, what I want to do in here to go from a descendant selector to a child selector is type that greater than symbol and a space in there. Now it's a child selector. Save, go back to my topic. So it is just the children. This is a child. This is a child. This is a child. These are not. They're down a level. And so it took that out. But we still have the problem with them showing up in these. So what we are going to add now is a pseudo class. It's the final piece to this. And after the P, I'm going to type a colon and type first dash child. So I'm telling it, hey, I don't want all of the children. I just want the first one. So I did that. I saved it, go back, and there it is. So now whenever I add a new note, and there I've got one, start typing, it's not going to add that word note to any of these, even if I press F5. So it's not going to add the word note to any of those. It's just what we want. Now we're almost there. We have it for our note, but we don't have it for example, tip, or warning. So I could just actually go in here in the text editor and just make copies of this. I'm going to press Control C, go down a couple, Control V. So now I'm going to just go in here and I'll put these in alphabetical order. So I need example and change example over here because we want not only the name of the style, but this text in here. And then this one, oops, is going to be tip. And we'll change it over here. So you can see, all right, so it took some setup, but this is going to make life so much easier for you going forward. And we'll type warning in here. And we just save this thing, go back to our topic, and there it is. Example, note, tip, warning, just like we want. And going forward, we don't have to mess with any of the formatting. It's doing the bulk of the work for us. All we have to concentrate on is the content that goes into each one of these. Now, one other thing I want to mention, because this is something that happened to me years ago. I had the design for the note actually had a really dark background. And so it's black in here. And well, my text is black and you wouldn't be able to read anything. So I needed the text to be white. And the first instinct is to go, all right, I'm going to create a class of the P tag called, P dot white or P dot note or something, note white, something like that, and make the text white so that it's different from this text, the regular text. But the problem with that method is that, all right, every time I type paragraph in here, I have to apply that special style class to it. But you can use a complex selector, just like I showed you, not only to do the auto numbering, but to change other aspects of this. You could change the size of it. So you're still relying on paragraph tags, just regular paragraph tags, like, there's nothing special about it, but under certain conditions, it's going to change the way that it looks. All right, so we have our elements. They look the way that we want them to look. One final thing that I want to talk about briefly is positioning elements like this. Now, in this project, in this topic, you can see these are just all placed one on top of the other. It's very, very simple. And this is the way I do it in my project. It just makes everything simple. But you might be thinking, I want to put, my examples or notes on the right side of the text or left side, something like that. Well, let's go into the help and I'll show you the options that you have. So in the help, you can go and search for positioning. And this is going to come up over here on the right. And this tells you 3 of the main methods that you have: responsive layouts, absolute positioning, and float positioning. And as you look at each one of these, okay, responsive layouts, that might be a good solution, but it's really designed only for online outputs. Absolute positioning, all right, you can use it for online and print, but there's some limitations for the online outputs. Floating is supported in both online and print, but you might have mixed results. If you use that. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll just give you a real quick demonstration of responsive layouts. That's a method that I use for a lot of content, and it tends to work real well, at least for online output. So back here in our topic, all right, let's say I'm going to, real quickly, I'm going to create a whole bunch more text and larger paragraphs here. Okay, I've got more text and I pasted some down here too. Let's say that I want this note to be to the right of this paragraph. So one thing I can do is create a responsive layout, and you can get to this from the home ribbon right here, and it's going to open up this responsive layout window pane on the right. Now, I'm going to do this really quickly. If you want to explore this in more detail, I've got a movie on responsive output, responsive layouts, and you can look at that, and I go through it in much more detail. So what this is doing is it lets you create, it kind of looks like a table, although it's not really a table, but it has cells like a table. And the idea is that you can place content side by side, and then once the window gets smaller, you get to say a smartphone screen, the content stacks on top of one another, because it makes more sense on a small screen to do that than to have it side by side. So responsive layout's real good for that. The magic number here is 12. That's what you want to know. You want all of your, you want each row to add up to 12. And so each cell is given a certain number, and that tells you how much space there is. And if you go above the number 12, well, then it wraps to another row. So I'm going to create a new style in here, and you can see what I'm talking about. 444 is the name of this factory template, and you can name these anything you want. You don't have to have these numbers in here, but it lets you know 444 adds up to 12, 3 cells, all of equal width. And on a big screen, they're side by side. You go to a smartphone and they stack one on top of each other. That's the way these are designed, these templates. So if I go down to 8.4, you can see, oh, the first cell is taking up 2/3 of the space, the right cell 1/3, but when you get down to cell smartphone, it wraps. I'm going to name this, I'll just name this tiles 8.4. Okay, and click OK. So it's created, but I haven't inserted it yet. I'm going to insert this row, and there I've got my cells. Now I'm going to cut this paragraph, and I'm going to paste it right there. And I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to right click on my div and cut that, come down here and paste it right there. And you're thinking, well, I thought it was side by side. What's happening here? Well, that's because the space of the editor, I had to widen it a little bit to see it. So you can see that it is side by side. And if I preview it in online output, there it is. It's right next to it. So that's an easy way to get content side by side. So you might decide to do that if you want notes to be on the side, or notes or examples or tips or whatever to be on the side of certain content. You can do that. Now, one final thing I do want to mention about positioning. I'm going to close my responsive layout window. And that has to do with micro content and meta tags. And let's go into the online help because I'm just going to show you an example, give you an idea of what you can do. So in the online output, you can see in the search results, I actually have, so this is a responsive layout in here where I have this position on the right and this stuff over here, but you can also go into certain topics and have, this is what's called micro content, this piece right here. And I can go into, well, let's go into something like snippets I had opened before. And I'm in the topic. And not only do I have my regular topic content right here all the way down, but I got these elements over here on the right. And I just decided to use this space. It's a combination, what I did, of a responsive layout and then micro content and meta tags. Again, I told you I have that video on responsive layouts. I have a whole video series on meta tags and a whole video series on micro content. And what I did was I tied them together, all those things together, so that when I landed on a certain topic, certain other content showed up over here on the right side. I could have had it show up on the left side too, or above, but I decided on the right-hand side. And so there are certain PDFs that are related to this topic. There's a video related to this topic, and I had them just show up here. Well, imagine if you have a warning or something like that, and you need it to show up on a ton of pages, on a ton of topics, and you want it to show up at the very top, like right up here, and it's the same one. But you don't want to go into every one of those topics and insert that thing. So you can make it much easier and quicker by setting up a responsive layout that ties into your micro content and uses meta tags. And so maybe this topic will show a certain caution, and then 50 other topics will show the same thing in the upper right corner, but other ones might show other blocks of caution, or they might not show anything at all. So that's something that you can explore. It's way too much to go into in this video. I just wanted to let you know that it's available to you. And that'll do it for this video on notes, tips, examples, and more. I could have just given you some styles, handed them to you, and you could have taken those and been on your merry way. But I think it's better to understand the details, the hows and the whys, so that you can really customize things the way that you want them, not the way that somebody else has done them. And you can take these concepts again and apply them to other content, other styles in your project. Thanks for watching once again. We'll talk to you next time.